Well, hello there everyone. Digimon Story Time Stranger has been out for a couple of weeks now, and it's nice to have a Digimon game that I can recommend with no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not perfect, there's some issues, especially with the side questing, and a pretty bad glitch that can sour your experience if you're transferring your save data from the demo to the main game, but the main story's great, the characters are well written, and the subject of today's video, it's got some pretty awesome bosses. And also some downright terrible bosses, and that's why today I'll be ranking them from worst to best. Now that being said, random fodder optional bosses from side quests won't be counted if they don't do anything to stand out because they would just pad the video. And at the same time, I won't be looking at King Drassel's Knights because those 13 super bosses are interesting, but they kind of would have to be the subject of their own video. If y'all want to see that in the future, let me know. Either way, we've still got a long video ahead of us because we have 45 bosses to rank. Oh boy, why do I do this to myself? Let's get into it, shall we? Number 45, Gran Kuwagamon. While this is a turn-based RPG, there are some bosses in this game that try to break away from the traditional turn-based combat and have more of a mini-game or puzzle focus with a unique twist with you dealing with the boss outside of traditional battle. Two of these bosses end up being pretty creative and fun. The others just sort of exist. And then there's Gran Kuwagamon, who comes and tries to eat your train, and you just have to keep running to the right, summoning out Digimon to knock the enemies off the train and reach the big bug in charge. Small problem though. Summoning Digimon has a small cooldown. Okay, not too big of a deal. You also can't choose who you're targeting without scanning, and you can't do that here because it's a mini-game. So you could try to attack the bug and instead you hit the metal crate, meaning the bug gets to you and attacks you. And if the bug touches you, you instantly die and have to restart the whole thing. Why? Why would they do that? In the other sequences like this, getting touched by an opponent either forces you into a fight at a disadvantage, or you get stunned for a couple seconds before continuing. Here though, a single touch insta-kills you and you gotta start over. I mean sure, Metal Greymon also had that issue, but his sequence is literally just running towards the screen for 10 seconds. And when you do reach the end, you can knock him off the train, letting him get ran over by Locomon, which actually does look kind of funny, but hey, you know what, it's somewhat satisfying. But okay, we get off the train, he comes to attack us at the temple, and now we get to fight him for real. Okay, this could be pretty good. We do battle a bunch of the Kuwagamon bloodline, so hey, maybe this will be something interesting. And Junomon goes and kills him in one shot, making this part of the fight completely pointless. Why? You don't even get the satisfaction of dealing with the boss yourself. It just gets kill stolen from you. And I don't understand why. Number 44, Lucemon. Yes, if there's any boss that might be the worst boss in the game alongside Gran Kuwagamon, it's Lucemon. One of the 7 demon lords, Lucemon is kind enough to ambush you immediately after you complete a pretty annoying puzzle where you have to run around in invisible platforms with no guardrails, and he just shows up to fight you. Now, this could be a pretty cool oh shit moment if it was a decent boss fight, but he's not. Lucifer isn't a battle of skill, it's a battle of luck. Lucifer is here to buff up his magic with spell boost and then unleash Divine Atonement over and over again. A very powerful magic attack with an extremely high chance to instantly kill its target, and it hits the entire party. Thankfully, I had a Digimon with a death block equipped, so it was more a matter of surviving the damage that was resisted, making it just tedious, but not that hard. But still, an insta-kill spamming boss that just shows up out of nowhere without warning is just malicious game design. I hate this boss on principle alone, and even if I took away that instant death, it's not that exciting. He's just spamming the same move over and over again with no real variety, so all I've really got to say is...
Errol Flynn and Alan Hale
Jesus
naked.
Christ! Lucifer's a fag!
Number 43, Crabmon. This is just straight-ass, a regular-ass Crabmon that the game decided, nah, you can be an optional boss. I don't know why it's here, it dies in one hit, but it made me laugh, so that's better than the bottom 2 slots. Number 42, Marsmon. One of the Olympus 12, a strong ally, and the final opponent should you choose to complete all of the Paradise Coliseum, and man is it disappointing. Marsmon has high stats and strong moves, but one super fatal flaw that kills the fight. He only has physical attacks. This fight can only be unlocked once you've entered the final dungeon at the ass end of the game, at which point Aegiomon has unlocked his light form, which comes with the unique skill Circlet Defense, a move that reduces incoming physical damage to 0 and has him counterattack the enemy, and the counter stays up until Aegiomon's next turn. And are you seeing the problem here? No matter what the boss can do, it won't matter, as you'll just keep hitting him with Circlet Defense over and over again, whittling away at his health. You could engage with other strategies, but this is the last boss of the Colosseum, the longest running side quest in the game. I think it's fair to want something that I can't just mindlessly mash through to win, and it's not like you have to build for him either, because he's not even that hard. Aegiomon will always be in your party at this point, and you'll always have Holy Forms unlocked, making any other decision just sandbagging yourself for the fight, and it still takes forever because he's still a super boss with a lot of health and defenses, and it ends up just feeling so much longer than it actually is because of how low damage you deal against him. There is another side quest fight with him earlier in the game, but I was over leveled for it, so he didn't really last there either, so kinda hard to strike a good balance with this guy, I guess. Number 41, Cherrymon. This is a very weird addition to the boss roster. After running around a foggy circle for about a minute, you get into this fight, and he's supposed to be the guardian of the current. And all I gotta say is, no wonder it all got fucked up, because he's pathetically weak. Like, I'm talking, he'll get off a single attack, then die the next turn weak. I wasn't over-leveled either. And that's to say nothing about the fact that you can have a Tyrant Kabaterimon by this point if you're skilled or crazy enough. You probably won't, but that means this is the one mandatory boss you can realistically kill in a single shot. Number 40, Metal Greymon. Our tutorial boss fight of the game isn't really much of a boss fight. Instead, it's more or less just a glorified cutscene, as your input in this fight is completely irrelevant. Your Digimon is in zero danger of dying, and your damage output is so pathetic that it won't make a difference. All that matters is the boss will last 3 turns before Omnimon kills him off. What's odd is you come back to the Cataclysm later in the game, but you don't rematch this boss then, despite there being mention of this dangerous foe re-emerging. It feels kind of like a missed opportunity there. I honestly hesitate to even call this the tutorial boss, because it's really just an interactive cutscene, and there's another one of those interactive cutscene-esque bosses that is way better than this one. And it goes all in on the cinema, while here, it just kind of exists. Number 39, Grappleomon. Marsmon before he evolved, and the final battle of the Underground Colosseum, he's about what you'd expect from a brawler-type opponent, with a lot of physical attacks, but this is only around halfway through the game instead of the ass end of it, meaning you don't have a win button against this playstyle. Additionally, his damage output can get downright nasty, with his charge moves and his signature attack that does high damage and lowers your defenses at the same time. King of Fists is not an attack to be trifled with, and it's a boss that honestly encourages the idea of having a dedicated tank and focusing more on support moves or aggro drawing. It's pretty basic for a boss in this game's second half, but we're starting to see where bosses have a little bit more design to them at least, which is nice because we've still got another 38 bosses to go. Number 38, Dianamon. While Dianamon may be one of my favorite Digimon to use as a party member, her boss fight sadly doesn't live up to her brothers. Dianamon has this one really big fatal flaw, and that's that she's extremely weak to fire in a game where strong fire Digimon are aplenty, and we have a portable sun on our side for this battle. It makes it so basically any gimmick or interesting mechanic she may have had ends up being irrelevant because she's going to die before it becomes essential. And you know, normally a hard boss doesn't make a boss great and an easy boss doesn't make them bad, but when they're so easy you bypass any mechanics, that does hurt the fight. The only other thing she has that stands out is her Goodnight Moon attack, which lowers your party's members' speed, which is okay, but it also has a high chance of putting them to sleep, and sleep is an annoying ass status effect, so unfortunately I have to knock her down multiple pegs. Number 37, Dr. Kuga. One of the few non-Digimon bosses in the game. I wish I had more to say about this fight because of that. Like, I guess props to Kuga for deciding, fuck Digimon, I'm gonna fight you myself, but his character isn't anything other than a dude who likes his eugenics with an inferiority complex on top of it. Otherwise, what does he do? A lot of spamming stun laser to paralyze party members and nerve gas to lower their accuracy. It just ends up being a fairly basic damage sponge boss, which is odd for a fight so late in the game. I feel like this fight was meant to be something of a power fantasy, as this is the point where you have the ability to have mega level Digimon, but that power fantasy never actually comes to fruition because instead of being a joke, the fight is just kind of really annoying with how he loves to stall you out. He does technically have a second phase where he has the anti-Digimon cannon, but he only gets to use it once, and it only really exists to one-shot your Digimon that you have deployed before breaking instantly, which I guess forces you to use your reserve team, which, okay, it's an interesting concept, but giving the boss a fuck you button isn't what I'd call thrilling game design. Number 36, Lilithmon. Lilithmon may be one of the 7 Demon Lords, but she's not the real threat in this boss fight. The real threat are her 2 hounds that are more durable than she is, and will continuously pester you throughout the fight if you're not prepared. Meanwhile, Lilith mostly just spams the reversal status both on herself and on you, making it where her weaknesses are now resisted and vice versa, and the same thing goes for you, which actually does a pretty good job covering her defensively, as she can just swap back and forth between her 2 modes. Or it would if her AI was at all tactical. Instead, she just spams it over and over again, so really that just means it's opposite day. You just annihilate her with dark attacks, or, you know, hit her for neutral damage like most Digimon will end up doing anyways, because elements are only half of this game's damage calculation formula. We do have the Bakusmon minions trio here to join us for the battle, to make up for our lack of Aegiomon, which is neat, but they're kinda just there, so that the trio has something of a conclusion to their little arc. The idea behind this boss is interesting, but it feels pretty underwhelming and awkwardly easy compared to the other Demon Lords, which is odd since she's the 3rd one you battle and not the very first, so she doesn't even have the excuse for being a warm-up. Number 35, Venom Myostamon. Venom Myostamon seems like he'd be this big, grand, epic boss after the game's main antagonist summons him to annihilate the Rebellion army and destroy Central Town. And size-wise, this is one of the largest bosses in the game, towering above you even when he's at the lowest level of the city and you're on the rooftops. It's a massive, colossal foe, and your work is cut out for yourself. But what does he actually do? Not a whole lot. He can give himself double actions, but by this point, we're kinda used to triple actions and even quad actions from bosses, so a dude just using double is a bit light, and he doesn't have the power to make up for that. He doesn't have any big special attacks or mechanics thrown in, he just sorta spams magic that can inflict bad status effects, which, yeah, it can get annoying very fast as your status defense gear is somewhat limited at this point in the game, but that's about it. He's not a character either, he's just a monster the main villain summoned to face you. He says nothing, fights you, and dies once again saying nothing while a mysterious Digimon just floats there menacingly. Also, I have to take a second to talk about this game's theater cutscenes. I'm not the biggest fan visually, but they are distinct, and are a good way to have Mireille give exposition without it feeling forced, but like... why the fuck does he look like that? It's so goofy. Number 34, Cyclonemon. This boss fight lasts a while, and that's definitely for the worse. His damage isn't too crazy, in fact it's pretty pathetic, but he's so tanky that the battle just ends up dragging on forever. You'd think the fight where Aegiomon joins you would be more interesting or center around him a bit, but all he can really do at this point is attract Echo, which honestly just gives a small child an aggro grabbing skill against a giant mutant monster, which probably isn't the ideal play. When I went back to fight this guy for footage collection, this was the one fight I lowered the game to easy mode for, not because he was hard to survive, but because the first battle against him took over 20 minutes, which is just a lot of wasted time. He just awkwardly tanks a lot of stuff, and he's sandwiched between 2 much better bosses, which makes his tedium stand out all the more. Number 33, Giant Slayer. I wouldn't say that Digimon Time Stranger has a 3-act structure, it's honestly closer to something like a 5-act structure, and the final battle of Act 4 is the Giant Slayer itself, the massive robot that's been looming overhead for the entire game, and acting as a massive story beat in the narrative, as we finally get a chance to reunite with Aegeomon after losing him and Inori and our operator at the end of Act 3. And after being forced to carry on our own for a while, we also have the big plot point of the story where we finally learn about Kanan's backstory. And it's here that I have to say, I wish she wasn't a silent protagonist. It actually detracts from the game. It's not even a blank slate situation like in, say, Pokemon, where here we clearly see her speaking and interacting with others while being expressive and having a real personality, so why is she mute? Both Dan and Kanan are fully voiced when they're acting as your operator, so why are they silent when in your control? It's a nitpick, I guess, and it doesn't really detract from the big story reveal or the emotional impacts, but it's still very annoying, and it does hurt parts of the story as a whole, at least with some of the interactions, because we don't know what Kanan's saying or Dan is saying, even when they're very clearly talking. I don't know, maybe it's more of a me thing, but that's just the one thing that does bother me with this game. Thankfully though, it doesn't really detract from the big story reveal here, or its emotional impacts, because story-wise, this is the most impactful moment in the entire game, where the two halves come together to give us the leader of the Olympus 12, Jupitermon. And with that, you're strong enough to fight the Giant Slayer, taking the place of the Fist in the intro of the game, and this entire fight is pure fucking cinema. You work alongside Apollo and Diana to drag the giant out of the city and into null space as things start to get more and more over the top, to the point I was half expecting someone to say, "Row, row, fight the power." The fight itself is little more than an interactive cutscene, but it's such a good moment in the story, followed by a hype as hell action sequence that I don't really care if it's button mash to win. I'm having fun just being along for the ride here. It's like a roller coaster. It's a satisfying first taste of what Chronomon has to offer as well. I just can't put it any higher because there's no actual mechanical depth. But it's so cool and such a good moment that I still love it, and I can still enjoy it and have a smile on my face watching it back now. You know what? I was already hinting some at Gurren Lagann, so here you go.
Fight the power! Fight the power! Fight the power!
Number 32, Akuamon. Okay, I gotta ask, why the heck is Cherrymon considered a boss while Akuamon is just listed as a mini-boss? This fight is way harder, has more mechanical complexity, and despite being silent, plays a larger role in the story, as it's responsible for infecting the world tree, and is the reason everything kinda goes to hell in a handbasket after the time skip. Do you think one of these guys became the Tyrant Kawaterimon we fight later in the game? Anyways, Akuamon isn't very dangerous on his own, but he's more of a commander unit coordinating with his minions and summoning in more to battle. Whenever one falls, he'll bring another one in at full health. These enemies aren't weaklings either, they're champion tier Digimon, making them a genuine threat if you're not prepared. So instead, the ideal strategy isn't to kill the underlings, but to put them out of commission with status effects like sleep or confusion, while doing single target attacks on the big beefy bug in the middle. This seemingly insignificant titan is honestly not a bad fighter and should have had a boss health bar. Actually, it's kind of funny, we're more or less on site with this dude's entire bloodline because we fight Kuwagamon, Akuamon, Grand Kuwagamon, Tyrant Kabuterimon, and you also fight the Hercules Kabuterimon as well, but he doesn't even really get to be a mini-boss. Number 31, Barbamon. And now we're going from the early to mid-game to the end of the game. We have Barbamon, the first of the 7 demon lords you face, and it's basically the same deal as Akuamon, but now we have to face off against some ultimate tier Digimon as reinforcements, and they'll come almost immediately after their previous iteration goes down, and they show up at full health, which can make metering your aggression important, but not a freebie, because while Geckomon is a good team player, you also have the less than intelligent trio of Ogre Brothers joining in, constantly tagging one another out, while Barbamon is able to actually put up a fight, unlike Akuamon, who just sort of looked at you funny while tanking hits. The last thing is that at half health, he permanently reverses his character, which sort of becomes a recurring spam thing Lilith did, but here instead it's just him replacing his weaknesses with other weaknesses, which, hey, encourages you to have good coverage, and I think that's a pretty good way to introduce you to the final dungeon and let you know you need to start building for it. Overall, I think it's a decently fun boss that does a good job saying welcome to Act 5 and welcome to the endgame. Number 30, Neptunemon. Now for a boss that I'm surprised is optional given his pivotal role in the story. Neptunemon is a pretty average boss fight, brought up by his cool design. The fact that it's a battle against a teammate, and additionally, he doesn't like to stay debuffed for long as he will often use a buff of his own to counter any debuff he's received. Otherwise, the fight has his mighty harpoon attack and all the powers you saw when he was on your side, though ironically, he's one of the few video game bosses that's actually stronger when they're on your side as opposed to an enemy. It's a fine enough little optional boss fight. I don't really have too much else to say about it, but it is part of the 12 Knights questline, so it does get knocked down a bit because that questline is way too freaking long. Number 29, Kuwagamon. This guy feels far more like the proper tutorial boss than Metal Greymon did. It's interesting seeing this cutscene after beating the game now, because you have a lot more context for the whole conflict going on, as it's not just Digimon fighting, but it's an all-out war between two different sides. This boss is fairly straightforward, being a big beefy bug that likes to use wind attacks, while you only now just gained access to cross arts. The boss wants you to throw around some proper strategy and not just wait for Omnimon to win the fight for you, which I appreciate. It's a basic fight that's more noteworthy for the story hooks surrounding it in order to get the player invested in the plot and the adventure to come as the fight ends the prologue and kicks off the game properly. Overall, basic, simple, but effective. And I mean, hell, his design's pretty cool as well. Number 28, Ultimate Brachiamon. This fight is a little bit odd, but it kinda works for what it's going for. Ultimate Brachiamon is the first boss with special defenses, meaning it has extremely high physical resistance at the start of the fight, requiring you to use magic if you want to get anywhere with the damage anytime soon, as he takes 90% reduced damage from any physical attacks. However, as the fight drags on and his health drops, he'll swap his defenses, now taking 90% reduced damage from magic attacks instead, making him a foe that's going to require at least something of a balance on your team, or not focusing all in on one damage type at least. A lesson this game is choosing to teach you in a fairly early and safe environment, as it will be important later and you will get killed if you don't follow it. Then, in the last stretch of HP, he'll be able to swap back and forth at will, requiring you to be flexible. It's a pretty neat gimmick for a boss that mostly just exists to become a glorified ladder, but it is hurt a bit by the amount of health he has, and honestly, it just feels like it drags on too long unless you have an offensive cross art, in which case it feels too easy because each cross art burst does like 40% of his health. Still, it's not terrible, it's just a little bit overtuned. Number 27, Minervamon. When I first saw Minervamon, I figured she was going to be a boss we fought at some point. After she joined your team, I figured we'd end up being forced to fight her in the endgame in some sort of tragic situation or terrible betrayal, but surprisingly, neither of those happened, so I figured she was just going to go unfought until I started working on her questline. Now, the fight has her use all the same moves she used when she was on your team, but it is super easy. But at the same time, that's kind of the point of the quest. Minerva was your rock or your pillar in the early game, carrying you through all the hard times and even taking out a bunch of champion tier Digimon like they were nothing. But after the cataclysm 8 years ago, she was separated from everyone she cared about and left to rot in a prison cell, being unable to grow and being left behind. While she's still respected by her peers and loved by her little brother and sister, she struggles with her weakness and that feeling of being left behind, and she feels responsible as one of the oldest to become strong and to protect those she cares about. She laments that she isn't there yet, but she plans to get there someday. And overall, it's more of a story fight than anything else, but it's not bad. And don't worry, she will get there someday. Number 26, Beelzemon. The sixth demon lord you face, Beelzemon, is kind of underwhelming if we look at it in a vacuum. However, he's another one of those minigame-esque bosses where you have to stop the attacking Digimon from hurting Apollo and Diana. Minerva and Aegiamon will cover your back while you handle the Digimon pouring out from the front. It's not amazing, but thankfully there isn't any one-hit kill bullshit, so it's not annoying and you'll conquer it first try. The fight itself is okay, it's just kind of a whatever fight. However, at the very ass end of Minervamon's questline, we have the chance to fight the true Beelzemon, who, instead of being this evil demon lord, is, I guess, a somewhat broody biker dude. Well, I guess if Beelstarmon is busy being one of the game's heroes, they didn't really want him to be too evil either if they're related. His fight isn't hard if you have a tank, but it is pretty satisfying, as a decent challenge, and his damage output is nasty if you're unprepared. And unlike the fake one, the real deal actually has enough health to last a few turns, so it's not just going to be over in a snap. That being said, he lacks any strong multi-target attacks, making him very susceptible to cheese by having a tank that can grab aggro. Still, we are starting to see a decent uptick in quality going forward, so that's good at least. Number 25, Greymon. We've been talking about Minervamon quite a bit recently, and I see no reason to stop now. This is the first boss fight that she'll join you for as she falls out of a portal fighting the Titan. It's a tough boss as you won't really be strong enough to take this monster down, but you're not completely helpless. And thankfully, we do have Minerva here to help. She's strong, but she doesn't beat the boss for you. Now this fight is here to introduce you to a lot of the game's major mechanics with bosses like them having their own CP gauge. What do you think CP stands for anyways? I'm gonna say Cytonox points. Anyways, that gauge is important as it goes up as they use different attacks, and when it gets to 3, the boss is the first one here to introduce an ultimate attack. Ultimate attacks are going to be a big charge move, and they want you to focus on attacking a specific point on an enemy to knock them off balance, leaving them stunned and unable to act in many such cases. But if they get it off, you take a lot of damage. It will also teach you what you need to do should you fail to stop his attack, as you'll need to guard or die, so yes, the guard command's actually useful in this game. Most of these big charge attacks you're not likely to one cycle, at least on a first time playthrough. This is where it feels like the game's bosses are starting to evolve. Even if this isn't the first boss, this is the point where it says the game is getting real. However, the fight goes on a little bit too long for my taste, as it does start to drag on and wear out its welcome, since it's fought right before you have the ability to really evolve your Digimon into their champion ranks, so your builds are fairly limited and your power is pretty low for the point you are at. It's not bad though. It also serves a pretty decent story purpose, as this is where the first big Digimon is seen by the public and exposed to the world, so it's a lot harder for anyone to cover it up. As well as us getting to reunite with Minervamon after the prologue. Asuna also more or less makes your character introduction here, as she only had a single line up to this point in the game. Number 24, Demon. I refuse to call him Creepymon, it's not happening. Demon is the second of the demon lords that you'll face, and is probably the most honest RPG boss in the game. There's no BS, no crazy gimmicks, it's just a straight up fight to the death. You're a party of 6, and your backup versus his, and well, his 2 Millenniummon that are flanking him. It's probably a little weird to see just an honest, no gimmick fight this high up, compared to the other straightforward bosses, but here's the thing, he's tough enough that you actually need to engage with the game's mechanics and its combat system. You're going to be swapping your party members around, taking time to buff, debuff, heal, And it's almost like the Demon Lords are supposed to actually be something of a threat and not an excuse to just fight a bunch of legacy bosses. And you know what? I think Demon lives up to it. Overall, it's a straightforward fight, but it's an enjoyable one where you're going to be making the most of the game's traditional combat system. Also, since we never see Kalismon again after this, I'm just going to say he's dead. Go ahead, Mediavision, make a Time Stranger 2. Prove me wrong. Number 23, Kalmaramon. Kalmaramon is something known as a hybrid Digimon, meaning that she can change forms at will. She doesn't do that, as you actually fight her Lanamon form before this, but it's not a boss fight, so it doesn't count. Which, really, the only reason is because I lost my footage for that fight and saved over it. Oh well. Anyways, Kalmaramon plays the sneaky traitor role, winning your trust, as she is the first friendly face you see after coming to the digital world after the 8-year time skip happens, and since she's on good terms with Venusmon, someone the player was on good terms with before the time skip, you're gonna be inclined to trust her. To be fair, I honestly did, at least until the poison scene. Then it was pretty obvious she was the traitor. That being said, she's a trickster, not a fighter, so she's really not that strong as a boss fight. This is more her rage-filled desperation attack after everything went tits up. It's kind of a shame she doesn't do any of her form changing during the fight, because that's one of the best things about her when you're using her as a party member. But it's still an overall pretty good fight and a good story beat for the second half of the game. It's also tragically ironic how pointless her death ultimately ends up being, as Plutomon and the Titans eventually join your side in the final battle, and not just Neptunemon's faction. Number 22, Ogre, Fuga, and Hyogamon. This fight was the final battle of the demo, and I'm not quite sure why. Either way, these three stooges all work surprisingly well together, having the powers of ice, fire, and beating the crap out of you, and while they seem like comedically easy jobbers at first, they start to get pretty tough even with Minerva in the party. The weird thing is though, this trio has a ton of cutscenes throughout the fight, and one event happens after another. Not to mention, we have Aegiamon unlocking Stun Fist Blow, meaning he finally is guaranteed to have a good physical attack, so there's that. It's a pretty fun, if not simplistic, fight against the comedic enemy trio. Number 21, Ogre, Fuga, and Hyogamon, Round 2. So after about 10 or so hours of game, we get to the start of the war arc and the trio comes back since we never actually killed them, and now they're being a bit of a threat because they got into a fight with Junomon and they appear to be winning. The fight is much the same as before, but now packing their strongest attacks and a second phase where they turbocharge and have multiple actions per turn, and while the fight is going on, all hell is breaking loose in the process, such as Titamon invading the human world, and the boundaries starting to crack. It's more of the earlier fight, but now you can have ultimate level Digimon in your team, so you've got a little bit more to work with. It's just surprising to see how strong these jobbers actually are as they win their fight against Junomon. And since it's their last fight, it's just a bit better than before, because you have more options to work with, so it gets one spot above. Number 20, Millenniummon. Millenniummon is the boss at the end of one of the game's more interesting side quests, as Inori wasn't the only one that was dragged forward in time. Norio was also dragged forward, and it really screwed up his life trajectory. And when trying to go back to the past, we get ambushed by this monster known as Millenniummon. God, that name is hard to say. And we have this really trippy looking arena. I wish more bosses were fought in the bizarre looking outer realms and not just the evil fiery looking area. I think it would have made things a bit more visually distinct. Unfortunately, this fight is kind of a joke. But hold your horses, because after a very, very long string of cutscenes, the boss returns to attack us again, now trying to kill Norio, his wife, his past self, and Hiroko. This time around, he has enough health to not crumble like a paper towel, and he's got access to his signature move, Time Unlimited, a powerful attack that has a high chance of pixelating your Digimon, making them unable to use skills. Basically, it's a goofy looking version of Seal. This is also one of only 4 bosses in the game that actually has a second health bar, which makes it stand out a lot more. I kinda wish this side quest was fleshed out into more of a proper story arc, cause it's an interesting one that sadly will likely get lost in the sea of random side quests for players. That actually is a big complaint I have with this game. The optional content is mostly just okay, and the in-game ends up throwing, not even kidding, like 30 side quests at you at once, and most of them are just, Run here and talk to NPC. While I honestly think the game would have benefited from having just 7 or 8 in-game side quests focusing around the main cast that you actually care about instead of, "Hi, I'm Growlmon, I forgot my applesauce, can you go to the fucking moon and get some for me?" I exaggerate, but there are side quests that are like that. Number 19, Machine Draymon. And here we have another side quest boss, though this one could be seen as one of the game's super bosses, as it's only accessible after completing entirely too many of King Drassil's side quests to find all of her knights busy screwing off around the world and assembling them together. Okay, well, to be fair, I guess technically Omnimon was locked in. Once you've gone and done all of those, you get to do battle with the only knight that's getting an entry on this list, and then we get a letter from Hiroko telling you she received a mysterious letter wanting you to come here. And that letter is from Kosuke Mizono, of all people. He wants you to learn the truth about the disaster of Shinjuku 11 years ago that took the lives of his wife and son, and after traveling to, essentially, Ground Zero, we come face to face with the one responsible for Inori losing her family, as it's none other than Machine Draymon, a classic big, bad, evil guy if there ever was one. You can fight alongside any knight of your choice, but the boss is not going to be an easy one, as his strategy is to simply nuke everything to the ground. Also, I can't really show it for copyright, but give the anime short a watch. It's about 4 minutes and it's really good. It goes a bit more into this monster and what he did. It is a pretty fun fight, but the question is it worth going through all of the side quests to unlock it? No, not even close. Honestly, there's just too many obnoxious side quests to deal with, plus, I hate to say it, most of the in-game side quests just scream, "We ran out of dev time in the story." Like, are you seriously telling me we come face to face with the monster that killed Inori's family, and not only does she say nothing, she doesn't appear in a single scene in this quest line? As much as I hate to say it, the final third of this game really struggles to tie up a lot of its plot threads, and it does feel kind of rushed. Thankfully, the Chronomon stuff is able to make it out okay, and the main story doesn't show too many signs of being rushed, but when you start blasting through the massive number of in-game side quests, you realize just how much more they wanted to do with this game, and it's kind of unfortunate. I joked earlier, but I really do hope we get an enhanced edition or a Time Stranger 2, sort of like what Hacker's Memory was to Cyber Sleuth, so we can see a lot more of this stuff truly come to a conclusion. Number 18, Tyrant Kabuterimon. I still have it in my headcanon that the surviving Akuamon from before the time skip evolved into this guy. This boss is kind of weird because despite being a major boss and one of the Titan generals, he doesn't really have any super special powers or a major role in the story. He's just sort of a dude leading the attack on the world tree. But when throwing him in a villainous lineup, he falls firmly into the no-nonsense, straight-to-the-business category, and in a world of melodramatic theater kids and comedic relief jobbers, sometimes the best way to stand out is playing it straight. And he's also extremely freaking powerful, making the other bosses up to this point look like a joke. Now, you are able to save Sirenmon before she meets her untimely demise, and Bacchusmon swore off drinking to lock in and help you fight this boss. There are a ton of cutscenes throughout this fight, and he doesn't speak a single line after his introductory cutscene. It's all Siren and Bacchus talking to one another, which, depending on how much you like those characters, your mileage will vary. I do like them, but still I feel like the cutscene spam is a bit excessive. And while they're busy having this heart-to-heart, I'm fighting for my freaking life over here, as this guy hits like a truck and is ridiculously fast, getting 4 actions in a single turn. He can hit you very hard with physical attacks, buff all his stats while increasing his elemental resistances to everything, use attack charges to buff up his physical damage to absurd amounts, and he has the oh-so-overpowered Shine of B, which may as well be a tactical nuke when he's charged up. Sure, it does have the downside of using up one of his attack slots, but hey, oh no, instead of attacking 4 times, he can just nuke your team to the ground and attack 2 more times after that. This is one of the toughest fights in the game, but thankfully it doesn't fall into the realm of bullshit since he doesn't have any super powerful charge attacks he can unleash, and while Shine of V is scary, it probably won't one-shot your party at this point in the game if you've been keeping your levels up a decent bit, which isn't too hard to do. After the fight ends, he just disappeared, so I actually figured he died off screen, but no, he ends up being not only one of the Titans to survive, but he's the one responsible for killing a traitor and saving your ass after you're imprisoned in the Unholy Cathedral much later in the game. Number 17, Apollomon. I just want to point out, I didn't realize you could actually nickname your Digimon up until this point in the game. I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out. It's just sort of, I don't know, I guess I figured it was like Shin Megami Tensei where you couldn't, even though you totally could in the past games, so I don't know. Anyways, you're firmly into the late game by the time you get here, and this is another one of the game's hardest bosses, because this isn't too long after you've obtained the ability to evolve your Digimon to their mega stages. Okay, quick question, why are Ultimates a lower stage of evolution than Megas? Nah, not important. You are now able to have Mega Stage Digimon, and Apollomon expects you to use every bit of them, as this fight is a monster. You don't really have that many options to outright negate fire damage, and the only strong ice users are extremely weak to fire, so you're playing a dangerous game against him, to say nothing about his Omni buffs and his disgustingly high durability. On top of that, Apollomon is capable of unleashing the power of the sun upon you, and not only is it a dramatic charge attack that does very big damage and will one-shot you if you're not guarding, but it's a dramatic charge attack that does very big damage, and its charge up is so powerful that the very act of it charging causes you to take burn damage. This fight is an insane juggling act, and for the unprepared team, this fight could very well be a wall for a good while if they're not ready. I won't say it's a difficulty spike because the game has been getting considerably harder, but it's certainly a step up in difficulty from anything you'd seen prior, and in my opinion it makes for a fun but very challenging, but also very satisfying battle. Kinda odd how much harder he is than Dianamon, but we fight him before we fight her. Number 16, Sharkmon. Sharkmon is kinda funny because if it wasn't for his two lackeys that were able to support him, he'd be one of the absolute easiest bosses in the game. But he does indeed have his lackeys, and despite him being a jackass in the cutscene, he does a surprisingly good job coordinating with his men. He's what you'd expect from a shark, being a big and somewhat fast physical powerhouse, but with two Divermon backing him up, they will play a good support role, buffing him up and covering his lack of defenses, as well as doing their own damage. But the thing that makes this boss genuinely smart is because he likes to go for his big charge attacks, but he knows that leaves him very vulnerable. So, he will have his Divermon utilize their taunt skills to keep the damage off of him, forcing you to either use multi-targeting moves that sacrifice damage, or take out his minions very quickly, which is easier said than done. Sure, it can be boiled down to kill the ads than the boss, but the fact that the random jobber villain is throwing around actual strategy is astounding when we're still in the first half of the game. Plus, the Abyss Zone before the time skip is also the prettiest area in the game, so yeah, I like that. Now, if only this area was more fun to navigate, then we'd be onto something. Number 15, Titamon. As I've mentioned before, this game has something of a 5-act structure, and after finding the place of Aegimon's birth, a rift opens up and we do battle with the end boss of Act 1, Titamon. Titamon is a no-nonsense powerful boss that loves to beat the ever-loving crap out of you, and he gets multiple actions in a single turn, and should you be doing side quests, this is the point where you'll have reached Agent Rank 3 and can finally start obtaining the ability to evolve your Digimon into Champion rank, giving you some more options to work with at your disposal, and I like that. And hey, if you didn't do every side quest, now's the time to do them, because after this fight, you're dragged away to the digital world of Iliad to begin Act 2, and you won't be able to return to the real world for a good long while, and can't return to pre-time skip Shinjuku until the ass end of the game when you get the power of time travel that really only exists to make it so side quests aren't permanently missable. A feature I'm sure a few of my friends are very happy about. The fight is challenging, and Titamon is smart, despite his brutish appearance. He's tanky, but if you start abusing his weaknesses too much, he'll put up barriers to protect himself against them. And if he knows you're weak to a certain attack, he's gonna go for it most of the time, unless you have Aegiomon taunting to grab aggro. Plus, while it's not my favorite boss theme in this game by any means, there's a real charm to the pre-time skip boss music and how it sounds like the battle theme you hear in a Saturday morning cartoon, and given this game's opening, that was 100% intentional. Number 14, Leviamon. I bet you're surprised to still see we've got some Demon Lords to cover. Leviamon, or as I like to call him, Biting Crush the Toost, is another of the 7 Demon Lords and my second favorite of them. It's a competent, no-nonsense fight that's all about the big, scary Biting Crush attack that he loves to use over and over again and will give Cyber Sleuth fans some PTSD. The memes are back and they're here to make you suffer, and to be perfectly honest, a lot of the good tier fights are kind of interchangeable and are around the 7 out of 10 range for me, with their own positives and negatives, so it kind of comes down to vibes and design. I've always found Leviamon to be one of the more memorable bosses throughout the series though, just due to the high difficulty he normally has. On top of that, this fight has a few bonus points as you fight alongside Neptune and Venusmon, and they're some of the most developed characters in the game that actually play a pivotal role in the story, and it's nice to see that Inori is still doing what she can to help, even though she's not a fighter herself. I am glad though that even though she tags along for 75% of the game, she never feels like a burden despite being a non-combatant. It's quite nice. But the other thing that gives this fight a few extra points is there's a pretty funny oversight with it, where if you go into the time theater right before this boss fight, Venusmon will join you for every single side quest you decide to do, because for some reason it doesn't check for that. It still lists her as in the party even when you're leaving into other areas and out of the final dungeon. Pretty fun little exploit if you want to try taking on some super bosses that way. Number 13, Roremon. Well, by my own random scaling system, this is the best boss in my vaguely defined idea of the game's first act, and I gotta be honest, if the demo was gonna have you start this dungeon, they really should have ended it at this boss fight, because it ending where you find Hiroko is just a random point to stop things. Why not have it end either when the prologue ends or here? Anyways, as someone that played a bit of Digimon World Dusk growing up, Roremon is there to make sure you, the player, have started learning the actual game mechanics. His damage isn't anything absurdly high, but he likes to do attacks that can inflict poison and lower your stats, and that poison is going to build up over time. And then he also has some other strong attacks he can do, like Hell Crusher, which will take out your weaker Digimon. It's simple, but for such an early game fight, it's a great way to push the player to start engaging with the different mechanics like cross arts, swapping out party members, aggro grabbing with your tanks, and you can also use items without consuming the Digimon's action for that turn, a feature that will be important and will save your life later on. This is one of the two bosses of the early game that I'd consider something of a wake-up call for the player to start building out your team and experimenting, with the other being the fight with Greymon. This ain't Pokemon. If you don't have a team of 6, you're doing something wrong. Number 12, Witchmon. Considering how bizarre the outer dungeons are visually, I'm surprised they didn't have more bosses in them. It's really only Witchmon, Millenniummon, and Machine Draymon. This battle takes place in a dream, meaning she's got some bizarre attacks she can use. Witchmon is one of the titans that instead of being loyal to Plutomon directly, she more so answers to Titamon, and after his death, she became furious, determined to avenge her lord. Mechanically, she only really has two standout features: her ability to put you asleep, and the ability to charge up a great and terrible power in her arm that she can unleash to devastating results if not stunned out of it. It's a fairly straightforward gimmick fight, just like other charged attacks are, but it has the oh-so-dangerous feature of doing additional damage to sleeping targets, which this boss loves to do, and her big charge attack, Balalula Gale, makes it where you can't be healed or cured until the status is removed from you, which means you have to use items. It's a decently complex fight that benefits from its unique battle arena, really selling the dreamlike atmosphere. We really need more outer dungeons that double as boss arenas. Missed opportunity on the developer's part in my opinion. Hopefully they'll fix that in a future DLC or sequel. Though, I suppose I should mention, you also can't really die in a dream. Keep that in mind. Number 11, Clavis Angemon. And not being able to die in a dream is definitely a good thing in this case, because Witchmon is one of the 3 titans to come to your rescue after you're being trapped by the Mad Oracle, which the other 2 are Tyrant Kabuterimon and the reborn version of Titamon, who survived his battle thanks to his power over time, which rewound his wounds in battle so much it turned him back into a child. I guess technically Skullbaluchimon as well, since he got turned into a baby as well. Not important though. After escaping jail, the jailer, Clavis Angemon, is none too happy, as you have to start navigating your way through this confusing prison to find switches to flip in order to free Minervamon, who's been trapped here for 8 years, as well as find a way to get up to the top of the cathedral. The other titans are running around, but they don't do you many favors. Clavis Angemon can't really be defeated, as he'll set up a barrier making him counter any and all physical attacks, while reducing incoming magic damage by 90%, making him nigh unkillable. And he'll pursue the player throughout the dungeon. This is one of the two puzzle-oriented atypical bosses I actually liked, as you had to navigate this confusing arena while having a less than friendly jailer on your ass for a good half of the dungeon. And the lack of music really does a great job putting you on edge, because he could be anywhere, and he doesn't walk, he flies, so you have to listen very closely for him. Sure, the other enemies here are no real threat, but Clavis himself could be right around the corner at any moment. This will continue until you're able to trick him into warping towards you and going inside one of the prison cells, which causes his blessing to be nullified and his powers to be dampened and slowed down. This battle isn't completely free, as he still has some strong attacks such as the key, but it's a fairly cathartic beatdown that I'm glad the game allows you to do after a stressful dungeon and a series of pretty tough boss fights for the last couple of dungeons in total, and Dianamon. Plus, at the very end, you get to briefly move during the Frozen Time segment thanks to Titamon, and you can trap Clavis in a cell to give you an opening to save Minervamon and clear a path to Junimon, or whatever she's become. Number 10, Volcanismon. Volcanismon is the kind of RPG boss that you fight it for 30 seconds and you instantly understand what it is you'll have to do in order to win. At the end of the Factory Zone, one of the 3 dungeons I consider above average in this game, with the others being the Unholy Cathedral and the final dungeon, Volcanus cannot be harmed outright. He has his arms that you have to fight and get out of the way first and foremost, making it the obligatory head with hands boss, and each hand has its own affinity, which means its own attacks, strengths, and weaknesses. You'll be using your powers to break through his hands to do the real damage, while they can taunt you in order to draw your fire, which is a little odd because they can never be active while he's vulnerable anyways. And when both hands are active, they can also perform some team attacks. But it doesn't end there, because once all the hands are broken, he summons out 4 other hands that are weaker in terms of stats, but they have more actions and a larger move pool, and once again, he has different actions he can perform with his sets of hands and depending on how many he has. It's going to be a juggling act, but it encourages you to have a wide variety of moves available for battle, and some good screen nukes also help. Plus, if you got the burst shot cross art that allows you to hit all enemies for typeless damage, you can shred through the 4 hands in a single blow, and it's very satisfying. Once the hands break, Volcanus will begin his charge move, which is just repairing his hands, and in turn leaving himself vulnerable for you to wail on him and just absolutely tear into this man. You probably won't be able to finish it in one cycle, but after both of his sets of hands have been destroyed, they're never coming back at full health. They'll just have half health, which means it won't take much longer to bring them down. It's a satisfying fight with some cool music capping off a good dungeon, and spoilers, we still haven't seen the end bosses for my 2 favorite dungeons. Number 9, Calismon. Jumping forward in the factory area, 8 years into the future, we arrive at the end of the obligatory tournament arc that many JRPGs love to have, and after beating the fierce and mighty Terrier twins, you don't get a chance to rest as the champion decides to come out and throw hands. Calismon is the older brother of Grapleomon, and both are evolved forms of the Bear Brothers that we met 8 years ago. One made a name for himself while trying to grow stronger so he could find and reunite with his older brother, while the other let himself become more and more of a monster so the Titans wouldn't attack his younger brother, and now we have to fight this giant berserker. Calismon is the kind of beast of a man, and his main gimmick is that he's going to be gaining power constantly throughout the fight, so as longer the fight goes on, the harder he gets, and he starts to lose himself the more that his health goes down and he goes all in on the offense. And therein lies the problem. His defense is kind of pathetic. He's a savage but powerful showman, so this arena setting is cool, and us having an arena deathmatch is a great setting, but sadly, you don't really get to interact with his gimmicks that much because he doesn't have much in the way of durability. This is one of the few bosses where you're likely to break his armor in a single cycle without being overleveled or even knowing its exact weaknesses, because it's just so easy to do, and once his armor breaks, he'll stay stunned for a while because unlike a lot of other bosses, he doesn't get 87 gajillion actions per turn, he gets 1, maybe 2. Once you get him below half health, the fight is interrupted by a cutscene where Leo starts getting through to his brother a bit, and that's where he learns the truth, and with a renewed desire to save his older brother, Leo digivolves into Marsmon to help you fight, and you know, this should be an epic moment, but unfortunately by this point Kalismon is so close to death's door that it's a little too easy to really like. You basically just skip this entire second phase. It's a cool fight, fitting of what is more or less the end of the game's third act, so to speak, but in terms of major bosses and end of story arcs, it's positioned at an odd spot because it's after Tyrant Kabuterimon, who got 4 actions a turn and was way more aggressive, and this is your last big boss fight before Plutomon, which, spoilers, we won't be talking about for a little bit, and he's one of the hardest fights in the game. This fight feels like it should have been something amazing, but the sheer lack of difficulty drags it down a few spots. Like, as I've been talking over it, I showed the entirety of Phase 2. Number 8, Alphamon. Alphamon is the final of King Dressel's legendary knights, being the secret 13th knight, keeping more to the background, only stepping in when he deems it absolutely necessary, and after completing way too fucking many side quests, he'll challenge you to a battle. Spoilers, this is the only one of the knights I'll be counting in this video, cause this list is long enough as it is, and he's my favorite of them. If y'all want me to make some sort of video about the knight fights, like a difficulty ranking, let me know. I wouldn't mind doing that in the future. Either way, Alphamon earns his title as a super boss. He looks awesome, has great music, is voiced by Keith Silverstein for some reason, and he is genuinely hard with things like acceleration boost to max out his next attack's power, Blade of the Dragon King, which not only hits hard but ensures he gets the first action next turn, and he's immune to bad status effects and does not screw around. And honestly, I think calling the music great is underselling it. His boss theme is, in my opinion, the best track in the entire game, and I will not hear otherwise. Then there's his ultimate attack, Soul Digitalization, that does high damage while also being able to inflict the party with the pixelated status. And unlike other bosses, he doesn't rely on one attack type. He's got swords, he's got the Light of God, he can tear open the Great Seal summoning a primal dragon that can alter the very soul of its target, and he's not afraid to just straight up punch you in the face. Even with Omnimon helping you, he's not going to be an easy fight. This was one of those super bosses that just hit right for me. I was thinking on my feet while having to adapt to what he threw at me and respond however best I could. Is he as hard as someone like Simon from Expedition 33? No, not at all. But it's still a very challenging battle and the best optional fight in the game in my own opinion. Number 7, Parrotmon. If Rarimon was the boss that first made you start throwing around tactics, then Parrotmon is the boss that is going to force you to lock in, as this is where the training wheels are well and truly off. We're no longer in happy tutorial land of pre-time skip Shinjuku. You're in Iliad now, and you're gonna die. Being at the top of the tower manipulating electricity, Parrotmon is noticeably immune to electrical damage, while also resisting regular physical attacks. Even with Minerva helping you and being the absolute pillar of support that she is, this fight is far from a freebie. Big birds got attacks of different elements, and the violent storms will cause lightning to strike periodically in the arena. Thankfully, the bird is such a lightning rod that you're in no danger of getting randomly zapped. Not so thankfully, this lightning heals Parrotmon. This boss is a major step up and can really put you through the ringer. I won't be sugarcoating it, this is not going to be an easy time, but it does feel satisfying to stand up against such a mighty foe and take him head on. However, he does feel a little too bulky at first. So it's a good thing that the boss has a phase 2 where Marukimon decides that being an armchair leader is lame and solos his way through the tower to come help you. The parrot has gotten slight buffs like double lightning heals, but at the same time you've now got Marukimon here to face tank everything while outputting some crazy damage, though not quite invalidating your efforts. It's a good and satisfying reward that is very cathartic after a tough to overcome first phase. And it has some story significance, and Marukimon flat out admits he doesn't know what caused this war between the Digimon and the Titans to begin in the first place, just that it's been going on for ages. Number 6, Belphemon. Anyone else surprised we still have a Demon Lord left to cover? Yeah, we actually do have one more that I haven't talked about, and it's the final of the 7 Demon Lords, as well as the penultimate boss of the game, so he's gotta do something interesting, right? Well, yes, he does. As you step through the gate to face Chronomon, you'll find yourself, instead of being at the death's doorstep, you're going to be in corrupted space. You want to look around because there's clearly something not right here, and as you explore, you'll find these little plushy goat dudes floating in the area, and you can choose to attack them. Once you make a loop through, you get a call from Marukimon letting you know something is very, very wrong. This boss fight is a puzzle, and I love that. Looking around and observing the corrupted environment, you need to work towards taking out as many of these goats as you can, slowly getting more information from Marukimon. Though I do have to criticize it a bit because there's a lot of running through the loops, and I feel like it's repeated maybe one too many times, as well as Nanimon being here, and I find him very annoying. But once you find enough discrepancies and you ran through the loop enough times, you can head on and get ready for the boss fight. Now, Belphemon is one of the 4 bosses in the game with a second health bar, but the idea is that the more goats you found and took out, the lower the King of Evil's health will be. But it's not quite that easy. Once his cute and cuddly form is brought down, we have to do battle with the real King of Evil, and he's a physical powerhouse if there ever was one, packing the might of Callismon without the extreme weaknesses. Since we also have to fight this boss without Agemon in our party, which means Belphemon doesn't have to worry about Lightning Shower, which deals 500% increased damage to Demon Lords. Now, I wouldn't say this fight is hard, but it's far from easy, as he can output a lot of damage, and if you didn't take out a lot of his goats, then there's a lot more health you have to deal with in Phase 1. Once you make enough progress, Belphemon starts gaining a lot of extra actions per turn, but thankfully Marukimon, the absolute chat he is, breaks through the distorted space barrier through sheer force of will alone, I guess, to come and help you take down the final of the Demon Lords, putting a stop to this menace for good, and opening the way to reach the game's final boss. It's a fun boss on its own, but that puzzle segment really just adds a lot to it for me. It's a genuinely fun and memorable fight that probably would have been higher if it had more of a story presence, or if Nanimon wasn't being a worthless piece of crap. Marukimon is a better man than me for not kicking his ass into the abyss for that. Number 5, Skull Seedramon. Our first boss after the time skip, and the game doesn't hesitate to show how things are going to get pretty different from before. Skull Seedramon is one of the largest opponents in the game, only being outclassed by the main antagonist, maybe Ultimate Brachiomon and Venomyostomon. That's about it. But I'm not quite sure on those two. Regardless, his size actually plays a role in this fight, as you'll be battling different parts of Skull Seedramon as the fight goes on. You start with simply a middle segment of his body that you can wail on, but it will counter physical attacks and loves to use ice magic. That's also very powerful. So you'll need to use your own magic attacks to hurt him, and as you can imagine, ice magic is a no-go because he's immune to it. Don't be an idiot like I was. After you deal enough damage, or enough turns pass, he will swap to his tail, which reflects magic, meaning you either need to use physical attacks or typeless damage such as your cross arts. So, sort of like Ultimate Brachiomon, having options available is a very good thing. Then it swaps to its fin, I think, which has no defenses to speak of and instead goes all out on the attack. Physical, ice, electric, you name it, he's using it, and he's very dangerous with it. Then we get to his final form, where his head is there and his core is exposed, as he's going to be charging up a massive attack. At this point, his defenses are adjusted back to normal, so he will just have his regular resistances from him as a normal enemy or unit. But you really want to take out his core before he can finish charging up, because it will hurt really, really freaking badly. If you can manage to destroy the core, you'll do massive damage, stun him for a turn, and force him to reset his pattern, essentially putting him back to square one, and at that point, well, the fight's basically won. All the phase shifting and visual changes accompanied by an excellent new boss theme really set this as the point where things are going to get much more dire than they were before the 8-year time skip. It'll be a challenge to overcome, but it'll be a very fun one to overcome. Number 4. Zombie Plutamon. Plutamon is the leader of the Titans and the ruler of the opposing army, causing this war to get out of hand in the first place. But he was a very competent and strong leader for his people, and while I don't think he'd give most Digimon the time of day, he would be open to negotiations with the help of a mostly neutral third party. However, in this timeline we were actually too late to find him, and he's already since died and left an enraged and decaying corpse, and we have no choice but to put him down, and we get a fantastic boss fight out of it. One of the big gimmicks of Plutamon in this zombified form is his Reaper Mist, where attempting to heal will permanently reduce your Digimon's maximum HP, leaving them very vulnerable to getting taken out in 1 or 2 hits, and there's no way to cure the max HP loss, you just have to deal with it for the rest of the fight. And to make matters worse, he has healing spells he can use on you, which means he's taking full advantage of that Reaper Mist and knows what he's doing even in this zombie form. However, we're not completely up a creek, as Plutamon doesn't have status effect immunity and his mind is especially unstable, so Gekomon will be helpful in this fight by inflicting confuse upon the boss, and then Plutamon will be hard-coded to heal himself when confused, which damages him and reduces his maximum HP. It's gonna be a tough fight because while most of his damage output is tolerable, it's not small either, and you can't overpower yourself that much for this fight because this boss is the gatekeeper to unlocking mega forms for your Digimon. Granted, there are still chances to heal, you just can't do it when the Reaper Mist is active. And when he goes to charge up, he has 4 body parts that must be destroyed instead of just 1, and you need to go for each limb to break, which will reduce the overall damage of his strongest attack, but he'll also be able to heal himself without the Reaper Mist present. However, since he's absorbing the Reaper Mist, this gives you a chance to heal off any damage you've received as long as it isn't a permanent max HP loss. But once he finishes charging up, you will need to be ready, because you're about to get hit by one of the strongest attacks in the game, if not blocked. The fight is absolute cinema, and the boss music is excellent. It's one of the best tracks in the game, and you first hear it at this point in the game. The second time it plays will be when facing Junomon, so I guess this is sort of a designated fallen hero boss theme. It's a thrilling boss fight with a fun gimmick, great mechanics, and a significant challenge level. In many cases, he could be a top tier boss, and in fact, he still is, but I do have one kind of big complaint with the fight. See, at the very end of the fight, you have to pick a dialogue choice. Pick right, you win the fight, dodging the final Hell Slicer. Pick wrong because you weren't reading or you were trying to be wrong to be funny, and your entire party gets wiped out for 5-digit damage. I get the idea, but I think I would have preferred if, when you pick wrong, he just wipes out your main line and then you just win with your reserves, or he regains a small amount of HP, still punishing the player for a bad choice, but not handing them a game over because they picked the wrong dialogue box. This ain't a text adventure game, it's a turn-based JRPG where my skeleton dinosaur is firing a shark missile from his back at the rotting corpse of a Super Sentai hero. I think we should be allowed to get a little bit goofy here. Number 3. Junomon. The other fallen hero, Junomon didn't take Agemon's decision very well before the time skip. We finally free Minerva after her 8 years of confinement, and now we see that Junomon's mind has decayed into something quite sad, while we get a cutscene that makes her sound insane when she starts talking like she is your mother. Though, this will make sense in about 60 minutes or maybe 90 minutes from this point. Like many late game JRPG bosses, she has multiple phases, and in her first phase, she's honestly extremely easy, just spamming Nightmare and Idle Bubble over and over, and by this point, you hopefully have at least a little bit of status defenses, so it's not going to be too big of a threat. However, this fight's going to get a hell of a lot harder very fast, because once she reaches about 70 or 75% of her health, the Iliad Temple starts using its power to overwhelm you, permanently debuffing your party by one stage, though thankfully this doesn't actually interfere with your buffs, so if you say buff your attack up, you'll still be at +1, not at 0. And she's also going to start using much stronger versions of her attacks, and she'll begin converging power into her lances for charge attacks, and you really want to avoid her getting off her charge attack, because I forgot to mention something. There's this teeny tiny issue that she's now locked you out of using items for the rest of the fight, so you've got very limited resources to work with in order to win, and you just gotta work with what you got. But you know what? I kinda love this. Now, thankfully, her lances are actually very easy to break, as 4000 HP is pathetically low for this point in the game, when it takes 3 turns to do absolutely anything, and she's not very fast at this point. But for better or for worse, this fight's about to get a whole hell of a lot harder, as at half health she'll debuff your party even further, and the fight starts to become do or die. In my case, it was a whole lot of die. It doesn't seem so bad at first, but then your MP starts running dry, and then your party members start dropping like flies as well. I thought swapping into a fresh party would be the call to beat her, but no, she starts taking basically no damage from cross arts or anything else, as her health gets low, and she's fast enough to easily knock off party members with Shine Burst and Hell Crusher. While there were some other fights I lost, this was the closest I ever had a battle get, as it was down to just Mastamon, that I nicknamed Angela, and she didn't have enough SP for an offensive spell, just enough for 2, maybe 3 heals, and with no other living party members, I was just trying to stall out the last bit of HP I could, hoping Minervamon would be strong enough to deal the finishing blow, and she pulled it off right before the boss would have killed me. It's an amazing boss fight and a great moment in the story where we learn about Chronomon's admittedly somewhat tragic motivation to everything. Number 2, Berserk Titamon. At the end of my theoretical Act 2 of the game, which is also the last boss before the time skip, we face off against one of the game's most complex bosses, with him having multiple phases across 2 separate health bars. Titamon is presented as a serious threat, which I respect. He's also not alone, as not only is he leading the invasion on the human world to get Chronomon's essence, he's also got multiple health bars because he's riding Skull Balukimon, or Baluchimon. How do you pronounce that? Whatever. Into battle, and it does a good job with them covering one another's elemental weaknesses to things like electricity. So what's the game want you to do? Well, it wants you to have Agemon use Lightning Pile to break through his defenses and force an electric weakness onto him, which you can then abuse. And it's a more than respectable warm-up fight gameplay-wise. Nothing really changes when you get him to half HP other than Dan and Kanan telling Inori and Agemon about their history and the Shinjuku Inferno, and also how they came from the future. And once Skull Baluchimon goes down, the mount is gone, but the Titan still remains. Titamon may be alone now, but he's no weakling as he absorbs the fragment of Chronomon's soul and absorbs its power to control time. You'd think this might backfire on him horribly and mutate him, as is the case with many Act 1 villains, or something like that, but no, he's still very much in control and just very, very pissed off. This phase is far more aggressive than before, while also swapping between counter stances in order to stop you from either spamming physical or magic attacks constantly. So you'll need to swap it up as needed and adapt on the fly, and while the gimmick is not exclusive to this boss, I think it's a solid evolution over Ultimate Brachiomon, and there's a lot more you have to deal with from Titamon offensively. Eventually, Titamon gets smart and he realizes, hey, he controls time, he doesn't have to fight fair. He'll set up a charge attack, and then break time by going forward 3 actions into the future, where he gets to attack you instantly for a large amount of damage, and he can do this again and again until it gets to be too much. If you've caught on, you can use the trap that Dr. Simmons provided you to set it up for Titamon so he'll be unable to manipulate time anymore going forward. If you haven't caught on after a few attacks, Dan or Kanan will just outright tell you, hey, we should probably use that thing that we got from Dr. Simmons. And at that point, he can no longer jump forward in time, but the fight's not over, he'll just have to fight you straight up like normal. Though, at this point, it's essentially a repeat of his first battle, so you know what to do, you just don't have Minervamon with you anymore, and he has higher stats. As the last battle before the 8-year time skip, Titamon is here to put up a fight and see if you're worthy of what the rest of the game has to offer, and he is determined to make you work for that victory. It's a great payoff to a fairly threatening villain, with some excellent music and a good challenge to boot, and I honestly go back and forth between this guy and my favorite boss being the best fight in the game. However, for now, we'll say Titamon is number 2. Number 1, Chronomon. Of course, the final boss is number 1 in my ranking. What are you expecting from me? Now, I will say, a large part of this boss is benefited from how much you care about the story and characters. I thought the story was pretty good, and I actually cared quite a bit about the characters, which is probably a good thing because while it's not just a cutscene, his first health bar is very, very story focused, to the point he's talking throughout most of the fight, and we actually get a special text box for it. I actually kind of wish this happened in more boss fights instead of throwing a bunch of cutscenes mid-battle. Ah well. That's maybe a good idea for the sequel. Either way, his first health bar and its many phases is pretty standard final boss affair. A lot of fighting, a lot of talking, and ominous music with chanting thrown in the background, while the Olympus 12 do their best to help you in the battle, and I appreciate that the other characters in this game are active participants in the conflict and not just standing on the sidelines while you do all the work. And storyline, well, we learned a lot about Chronomon, while a more cynical individual could point out, oh yeah, God was evil the whole time, big whoop. That's not really the case here. See, Chronomon was created for the stability of the world and the one governing the flow of time itself. He was benevolent, but after realizing all the other denizens of Iliad were granted freedom to choose while he was not, he felt jealous and attempted to overthrow the creator so he could obtain his own freedom of choice. It failed horribly, and he was sealed away, and after decades of being imprisoned, he wasn't even allowed the choice to die. Until he was able to slip through a single spawn in the form of Digimon, who would become powerful enough to kill him and overthrow the laws of time itself. But really, he didn't care how it happened, he just wanted to die. Even as we fight, he's not really in control of himself, he's just a puppet on a string. I wouldn't say he bears no ill will, as his dialogue shows he's become very bitter and possibly even psychopathic, but I would say that while he's not a sympathetic villain by any means, there's a case you can at least feel a little bit bad for him and the loss of a potential good man that once existed, if only thanks to Murray's storytelling giving you a bit more context and everything. Of course, that's just the plot phase of the fight. Once we get past his first health bar, Chronomon will devolve all of your Digimon into their baby forms, but we have no time for the It's Hopeless cutscenes, we've got to keep on fighting. Thankfully, Apollo and Diana are here to help bear the brunt of the assault for you, and it's a pretty nice reverse from the early game, where you came to their rescue when they were children, now they're coming to yours. Through this fight, you're going to have to fight with your baby Digimon, while Agumon needs to stay alive as he'll start using his powers over time to keep slowly but surely advancing your Digimon through their stages of life, from training all the way up to Mega. Though it skips training too for some reason, I guess they couldn't find an excuse to keep that one going. Either way, it's exciting, it's fun, it works great with the narrative, and it's kind of funny seeing Chronomon start breaking down and crashing out with how he's pissed off that Agumon is actually hopeful for the future, instead of being doom and gloom. And the music in this phase is also really good. I can't play it, not because of copyright, but because I honestly can't find the soundtrack for this game outside of that one boss theme I played earlier. Now, this phase is fun and satisfying and just really nails the feeling of look how far you've come. It's taking you through your whole journey, so I figured the only fitting way was to use the trio I started the game more or less with, Agumon, Lunamon, and Gomamon. For this particular phase of the fight, seeing how they've grown and evolved. And yeah, it was satisfying in its own sort of way. It's a satisfying bit where it's a lot more gameplay focused than the previous phase, though it is still a story phase where you're kind of waiting until he unleashes loathsome ordeal after you've gotten your Digimon fully evolved. But not willing to accept getting one shot at the very start of the fight, Minervamon rallies as the last standing member of the Olympus 12 and joins us for the final battle. So, you know, here's your "this is it, the final battle" quote, insert that here. Phase 3 is a bit of a cooldown phase, giving you a chance to swap your team around and get everyone healed up before he gets to half health and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And I'm glad out of any of the NPCs to join us in the final battle, it's Minervamon. She was your anchor in the early game, keeping you safe from the threats that were in your way and were far above your pay grade. And even when you more or less surpassed her over the 8-year time skip, she still stood tall against overwhelming odds to help you, and finally when Chronomon gets to half health, she gets that determination she's been looking for and digivolves into her Mega Plus form.
Pathetic! And after my siblings showed such strength, this is really the best I can do? I'm pathetic. I'm such a disgrace. But this is exactly what I wanted to feel. I volunteered to go to the human world because everything just felt so unsatisfying. I'm grateful. You've lit a fire in me, one that I've been looking for. I'll show you what I can really do! Magnus Merry-Go-Round Deluxe!
This final phase isn't very difficult, but it is by no means a free ride. The music may be encouraging you to win the day, but you're gonna have to earn it first, as Chronomon finally starts using his own charge attack and denying the future, doing whatever he can to wipe you out, and you're likely going to struggle to break it in time, so you'll need to swap your Digimon around or get your full team ready for battle. It's going to be a challenge like no other, and you'll have to work hard for that win. This fight is both a satisfying conclusion, which also acts as a victory lap for the player, but it still gives a good challenge as well. We have a good challenge, good story, amazing music, and the feeling that the entire journey's paying off. This is a JRPG final boss done right. Honestly, I love it.
This is the end!
Also, major credit to the goodbye scene here. They could have gotten away with just having Inori hold her hand out and walk forward a bit, but this girl is going through all 5 stages of grief in the animation during these 60 seconds, and I'm not sure how it sounds in the Japanese dub for this scene, but Allegra Clark nails it. A fantastic finale, I'd say. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this boss ranking. Holy shit, this video was long, and took a good while to make, but it was fun. Digimon Time Stranger is fantastic, and I'm glad that we have a Digimon game that just set out to be fun instead of having entirely too many ambitious but clunky mechanics. It's great. The game isn't perfect though. A lot of its dungeons and areas are extremely linear, like something you'd see out of Final Fantasy X, but unlike Final Fantasy X, you have to run back and forth through the places a lot, so the level design can kind of become something you zone out while playing. Not quite tedious enough to be annoying until you're doing the in-game side quests, but you stop really thinking about it. On top of that, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 side quests, a lot of them are pretty whatever. You just run around through the area and mash the button through dialogue that we don't really care about that often. And then some of them are bad. I do like a couple of them at least, but you know, it's just kind of meh. Now, I know everyone likes to compare this game to Pokemon, but honestly I think that's kind of reductive. They have entirely different gameplay styles and mechanics, plus the game is far more in line with something like Shin Megami Tensei, along with having a considerably darker tone. I definitely have gripes with this game, but that doesn't mean I don't love it. I don't think it's going to be beating out Expedition 33 as Game of the Year, but it's a game you can still have a lot of enjoyment with, and hey, I like the main story, love the characters, and that's honestly what I'm looking for in any RPG. Give me a reason to care, and honestly, Digimon Time Stranger most certainly did. Either way, I've rambled on long enough. That's all I've got for this video. If you liked it and want to see more content of varying quality, or other absurdly long boss rankings like this, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.